Hi, welcome back to Say More Words. This is Tamika Taylor, your hostess with the mostest. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited to share the person that I have for you today on the podcast. But before we have him tell us a little bit about himself, Stefan, can you tell me what the song of the day is? And I'm really excited about this.
So I have a very specific one. There
Okay.
is a musical that I think just opened on Broadway at the time of this recording called How to Dance in Ohio. And it's the
I write that down.
beautiful story of these autistic adults who are having like a second chance prom dance for the first time as adults. It is so heartwarming. And anyway, I saw this show do their little debut performance on Macy's Parade, and I've gotten obsessed with this song. Okay, and the title is perfect for me as a coach. The song is called Building Momentum.
Ooh.
So it's a great, like, if you're into musical theater, great score, great cast. Like, it's a fun musical theater song. But I also like it because it's a fun song, but it does speak to this principle that everything in life is momentum. And it has this fun energy. Like, I feel like I build momentum when I listen to it. So that is my song of the day.
Yay! I love it. I love new musicals. Broadway is one of my favorite things in the whole world. Well, music in general is one of my favorite things, but Broadway specifically. So I'm super excited. I wrote that down. I haven't heard of that, so I'm super excited to
It's
listen to
brand
it.
new, but I think it's going to blow up. So if it does, remember that you heard it here first.
Here first. I'm so excited. Okay, everybody. I'm so excited to have Stefan Lovegrove here. He is America's life coach, and just one of those people. You all have heard me say it before that when you see somebody and you're like, that person, I want to love that person for the rest of my life. Just his energy that he brings to a room, to people, the way that he sees you, the way that he talks to you. We bonded at an event recently because we were in charge of the music for a very eclectic group of people, and it was stressful and wonderful and chaotic and beautiful and all of these things. And so, Stefan, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yes. And let me just say that you are also one of those people because I remember just seeing you in the crowd that day, and your light and your energy and your radiance immediately jumped out and stood out. So I just want you to know that. And you are one of those people. It's very mutual. So I have been in the personal development space and coaching people for almost 10 years. I'm about to hit the 10-year mark, which is hard to believe. I
Yeah.
love having conversations that change people's lives. That's really what got me into coaching to begin with, is I realized the power of a conversation, and that the right conversation can not only change somebody's mood, which is great, right? I would love for someone to feel better in the moment, but more importantly, can change their results, can change their destiny, can change the trajectory of the path that they're on. And so that is the work that I get to do with people. And that's the short version, but I'm glad to be here today, hoping for a life-changing conversation with all of you.
Okay, I love that. And I love the power of the conversation. So, where in the last 10 years, well, I have so many questions, but first, in the last 10 years, how did you get where you were to where you are now? Like, as America's Life Coach, as somebody that everybody seeks out, like, what kind of was your path? Because I know it wasn't like a linear thing. Like, we have the ups and downs and the highs and lows. And what I know the conversation started, but how did that grow?
Yeah, well, I think a couple things I'll share here. One is it was a unique path to me that has unfolded in its own way, and I could never have perfectly planned or calculated or predicted all of it. And it didn't look like anybody else's path either. And I think that's very important to say because I am all for learning from others, especially in a sense of avoiding their mistakes. That's great. I am all for reverse engineering somebody else's path that has done something really well. But I also think what has led me to success, what has led me to my audience and my dream clients, what has led me to some of the most fulfilling, rewarding experiences of my life has been such a personalized path that if I was not open to inner guidance, if I was not open to, you know, maybe it taking a little bit longer or feeling that way at times because I wasn't just copying someone else, but really taking the time to figure out my own path. I think that's been a huge part of it. I also think, it's an interesting thing in the business space when people talk about niches, or personally, take the poll. Do you say niche or niche personally?
I say niche
Okay, so do I.
because I think it's more
So
posh, but I don't know which way is right.
it feels that way,
Yeah.
certainly. So what's interesting is, often someone will jump into a new business and people will immediately say, you need to know your niche. And I kind of have a belief that it's a little bit difficult for people to know exactly where they want to fit in the space without any experience yet, right? And so much of where I ended up, I don't want to say I fell into because there was intention, but I guess I could say I experienced my way into it, right? So when I started coaching, I just showed up on social media, loud and proud, on Periscope at that time, and I was willing to coach anybody that first year, right? And so I always tell the story. I was on Periscope. It would introduce you to people anywhere in the world. My first 5 clients were an actor, a music artist, a healthcare executive, a lawyer, and a megachurch pastor. Those are my first 5. Very random group of people from Periscope. And over time, as I coached more and more and more people, I started to notice trends. I started to figure some things out. And I started realizing that actually my entrepreneurs and my entertainment people with the non-conventional dreams and visions and careers were a lot more fun for me. And again, this is just me personally, but a lot more fun for me personally to coach than my 9-to-5 people. And that's not anything negative. That's not being shady. But you learn these things as you go on through experience. And so a lot of the things, I've met and worked with and become friends with a lot of people in the reality TV space. That was never a plan. That just happened along the way, right? So I think a lot of it has been all of the twists and turns that are just life doing life.
Yeah. So one of the things that stands out to me is I feel like a lot of people, and this is coming from my heart too, when I first started, I didn't trust myself enough to go along with the trends. Like I saw it, but I didn't trust myself or even believe in myself enough to be like, okay, yeah, this is where I need to go. Like this is the path I have to go on. So what have you just naturally trusted yourself? Like what did your trust and belief have to look like in order to be able to go from this step to this step to this step to this step and just believe that it's going?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because trust is huge on so many levels. Like this is one of those conversations that my brain starts firing on all cylinders and there's so many
Yeah.
directions we could go.
Yeah.
But I think self-trust is particularly an important one because a lot of people really don't trust their inner guidance. And it's so funny because a lot of people almost have a belief that like the inner guidance is the thing that is going to sabotage them, or like this isn't going to work. This isn't going to lead to anything good. And I would just encourage people, if you feel that way, no judgment. I've certainly been there, but I think it's worth getting curious about why would that guidance be leading you astray? Why, it's funny. Earlier this year, there was a moment where I was talking to a client and we're looking at 2 simultaneous realities that existed. On one hand, they said, I'm doing all of these things that usually work. And this is like my go-to list. These are my reliable things. I'm doing all of these things that usually work, and it feels like none of them are working. So that's one reality. Simultaneously, they told me, I know, and I've known for a while now that I was supposed to start doing this and move in this direction and, make space for this. And they said, but I don't really see how that's going to do anything for me. I don't really see how that's going to bring money. And they didn't even see a connection between the two before we had this conversation. That could it be that you don't trust that this guidance is actually trying to lead you to where the money is and the good is and the prosperity is? And so here they are on one hand ignoring the guidance because that's not going to lead to anything good, and then let me keep doing what's not working and maybe it'll eventually work. And so many people do that.
They They do. And I feel like, a lot of the work that I do, like in the subconscious of, figuring out what family members said blah, blah, blah to you to make you create whatever belief to get to where you are. But it's so fascinating to me, all of the stories of the people who follow. And one of the things that I, quite honestly, this entire year was fighting against something that was so blatant in my face that God was like, if I just keep dropping these people, will you do something about it? But I had this inner
Hmm.
knowing and I was just ignoring it. And so is there anything that you can say to somebody is like, when that inner knowing shows up, how do you resist stopping? And then
Well,
not
well,
resist stopping, but actually go after what it is that your heart is singing about.
well, two things about that inner knowing. And this is a great conversation. I could talk about this subject endlessly. So I love that you brought us here. First
Yes.
of all, I feel like divine guidance is often quiet, not
Mm,
loud. In fact, usually by the time it's become loud, um, Oprah famously says, life begins with a whisper. And then there might be like a little dripping outside your window. And then and if you keep ignoring the messages and the signs, eventually there might be a brick coming through the window to really get your attention. But you don't have to receive the message as a brick. Life was trying to talk to you as a whisper. And I think this is one of the things we have to be very aware of in a world where marketing is so loud. And I'm not against marketing. I do it. I encourage it. But understand, all marketing by design is going to be loud. And whether or not it actually has what you're looking for, it is marketing's job to convince you that it has what you're looking for. So marketing is always going to be loud. This is why I take some time every single day to have a space where I can just receive divine guidance, and I will literally open a notebook and just have it there. And I don't put a pressure on it. I don't have to like hear something every day. But I want to hold space for that. I want to have a daily practice always where I listen, and where I listen with an understanding that divine guidance is going to be quiet. It's not going to be loud. And I have seen people get scammed over the years because they fell for what was the loudest. I have seen people hire the wrong mentor or team member or what have you because it was just loud and exciting and appealing. So I think that's a big piece of it. The other thing I would say, one of the beliefs that I have done a lot of work and a lot of teaching around this year in particular is this core idea that God really does want all good things for your life. And I think so many of the reasons people resist the inner guidance come down to something having to do with this conversation.
mm,
I
mhm.
share a very kind of extreme example story in a teaching I did recently about one time I was having a conversation with a client and we're talking about surrender. Why is it difficult to surrender? And to me, this is one and the same conversation. The same reason we don't listen to the inner guidance is the same reason we don't surrender to something is we're afraid that if we do, there's going to be a loss. Something bad is going to happen, that it's not going to be worth it in the end. And so my client said, it's so hard for me to surrender and I don't know why. And we did an exercise to really explore not what do you consciously say you believe, but what is lingering there subconsciously. And so we're doing this little exploration, and what comes forward is, Stefan, what if I surrender everything in my life? And then God's will is for my 5-year-old to get terminal cancer. And that's an extreme example, but this is what came up for them. And they thought, because what if God takes my 5-year-old from me? And I said, well, now we have something we need to do the work, because who told you? Where did this come from? What is this idea that God is coming to take your 5-year-old and that God is going to send something as awful as terminal cancer? And so people have a lot of wonky beliefs like that.
Mhm.
And particularly as it pertains to surrender, I find people often think I'm surrendering to less. It's going to be
Mm.
crappy. It's going to be disappointing. It's going to be hard. And maybe I'll eventually get there. And what they don't realize is God is always about more, never less. God is not asking you to do anything or leading you anywhere. The guidance is not telling you something so it can ruin your life. It is only ever trying to lead you into more and something greater, something better.
It's so good. So what I just feel like I just got preached to and it was everything and I loved it. What do you think or well not what do you think? What is one of the biggest ways in which you surrendered or you listened and it paid off?
That's a good question. Um, it's funny because I've actually been sharing some like real time, here's what I'm living examples in my teaching this year, which
Yeah.
is a new thing for me. And I talked about this with my community, but for the longest time, my overall philosophy has been I don't want to teach something until I've really mastered it, right? So, like, money, I was in the flow and living it for multiple years before I ever taught anything. Luxury branding, I was living it, demonstrating it, embodying it for multiple years before I ever taught anything. I've never wanted to be I just learned this last week. Now here's my course of mastery on it, right?
I get
Um,
it.
but I have felt like, I don't know what's in the air. I don't know what's different about this moment. I have felt like people need examples of leadership kind of in real time, and just to hear it while it's happening, not while it's a success story 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. So one thing I'll say that was like a huge, I guess, example. Well, I'm trying to figure out which example I feel called to share here. There's so many I could use. Life is surrender. You know what I mean?
All of it.
Well, here's a big one. For the longest time, I didn't lean fully into the spirituality in my teaching, my coaching, my content, because I wanted to be as inclusive as possible and I didn't want to alienate anybody. I didn't want to polarize from people that I was like, but they would like me, but they could benefit from my work, and I don't want to polarize anyone with my language. And for the longest time, I kind of resisted that for all of those reasons and more. And it's wild because this year, I remember I had a conversation with my coach, and she said, can we just acknowledge that in all of the work you've done, it's always been business as a gateway to personal development, and really personal development as a gateway to spirituality. And you know, when you get one of those insights that like, that's always been true and how could I have not seen it? And something clicked for me in that moment. And I was like, that is so true. And you know this because you've heard me speak.
Yeah.
We may talk business. I don't mind talking business. I like those conversations, but it will always with me be business as a gateway to personal development as a gateway to spirituality. And so for me, one of the biggest surrender moments of the last 12 months has been, you already know this about you. What if you just like owned it and embraced it? And I really feel this is a message for someone listening today of, what if you owned and embraced everything that you know about you, everything that is distinctive about you, everything that is your difference, your assignment, your unique gifting? What if you owned it, not as like something that, oh, I kind of secretly wish it wasn't like this, or I wish I was more like this person, or oh, let me hide this part. But what if you just owned it? And it's been the wildest thing because I will even get messages from people, and the messages start out with something that confirmed my like worst fear of surrender. And they say, I got to tell you, it triggered me so much that you talk about God so much. I was like, why does he use this language? I didn't like it. And they start off this way, and I'm like, oh no, this was my greatest fear. But this is such a beautiful example of it's like skydiving, where people's greatest fear is the heights and the greatest fear is the jumping out of the plane. And yet the same thing that is the greatest fear is like one of the most, I don't know, have you ever been skydiving?
No.
Oh, I love it.
But I've been bungee jumping. It's kind of similar.
The free fall feeling.
The free fall, yeah.
But see, with skydiving, it's so interesting because when you jump out of the plane, I thought it was going to feel like a roller coaster and the stomach drop when you hit the hill. That's what I thought it was going to feel like. But those of you who have been skydiving will know it doesn't feel like that. When you jump out of the plane, it's this stillness and this peace, and it's like you instantly realize you're actually okay, and it is the stillest, calmest, most euphoric thing you've ever had in your life. And I feel like that's always the truth with surrender. And I started to get these messages, and people would say, I didn't know how to feel about it. It triggered me up front, etc. And then they would share with me, but this was exactly the medicine I needed. And this healed me so deeply. And I started getting testimonials. See, this is the end of the story of surrender, that it doesn't look pretty when you're like, I'm doing my best to surrender and I don't know where it's going to lead. I don't know if any of this is going to work out. Right. But the end of the story that's still being written is I have gotten testimonials and breakthroughs and stories from people that really are on par with, and in some cases I would say have even surpassed even some really epic, crazy, amazing results from coaching over a decade. And I thought, wow, imagine if I didn't listen to that guidance. And here's one final thing I'll say about this. The guidance doesn't always tell you what the results are going to be. And that's, I think, part of the problem. If the guidance had told me, this is how it's going to be received, this is what it's going to do for people, this is how it's going to change your life, that would have been easier. But see, the guidance doesn't always tell you the results. The guidance just tells you what to do next. And so that, I think, is part of the learning to trust is, can I trust the guidance of what to do next when actually I'm not sure where it's all going to lead, but can I trust still that this is the right next step?
Oh, that's so powerful. And it's so funny that you say that. That's one of the things, one of the big themes over my career and my business and everything building is that authenticity. And sometimes I think that people have that authentic self inside of them, and which would be your guidance, but they think their authentic self can't be seen. And so you, like
Hmm.
what you just processed is so very beautiful. It's a beautiful picture of that. Like, this is my authentic self that I've been hiding and is deep down inside. And if I just let this out, like, who's waiting for me to help them? And I can't help them because I'm not being authentic.
And I learned this connection that in being all that you are is everything that you want.
Mm.
And the
Oh,
illusion is that it's the opposite. That if you will just betray yourself a little bit, if you'll just compromise it over here, settle for this, tone this down, the illusion is if you change yourself, you can get what you want. And yet
mm,
it's the opposite. It's the more that you can step into all that you are, the more you naturally end up with everything that is meant to be yours.
amazing, beautiful, done, love it. That is so. I mean, it's one of the things that I try to tell people, but you so eloquently said it. Like, it's beautiful, and I think honestly, one of the things when I'm working with people, and I don't know if you get this too, where you get like so choked up because you finally found somebody's authentic self, or they found their authentic self, and you get to watch it happen, almost like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. Like, they've been just a mush pile for years and years and years, and now all of a sudden they're themselves, and it's where the magic lies, and that is just, it's beautiful. That's one of the most beautiful journeys.
And people's authentic self is not going anywhere. That's the thing. Is like you
Oh,
can put off that work. You can decide there's other things that are more important to me now. You can choose your priorities. You can do all of that. But who you really are is still underneath no matter what. And it's still going to keep talking to you.
mm. So with that, and my final question for you is one of my favorite questions. And I think it's a really hard question. People get really annoyed by it, but it's one of my favorite questions to ask people because it's a thinker, and it's, who are you?
It's funny that people get annoyed by that
I
question.
know. I know.
Um,
I know.
I think, you know, I think on one hand, I answer this question in numerous ways every single day because I do take whatever follows the words I am very seriously. And I think there's
Mhm.
infinite answers to that on one hand. And yet, I think the answer that, at least in this season of life, means maybe the most to me and brings me the most peace is just the state of being of I am a child of God.
Mm.
And I think there's just a pressure that gets removed
Mhm.
for me there. You know, I think a lot about cause and effect and how could I not in the work that I do as a coach. But one of the things I love to quote is Course in Miracles says love is the original cause. Love is the ultimate cause. And I think there's something so reassuring about we do have free will and there's a lot of power in our decisions and we get to choose all kinds of things for ourselves at cause and effect. But when you realize that love is like the OG cause number one and reason you're here, and when you realize that it doesn't all fall on you, you're not creating it all by yourself, you're not on the journey all by yourself, I just think there's a peace and a relief and a
Mm.
freedom to be you that comes there. And so I think when I start there, I end up in a good place.
Yeah. Ugh. That was beautiful. Well, I could ask you 20,000 questions and keep you here for forever and ever and ever. And I don't think you're going to be a one-time person in my life or in my business or in my space. I love everything that you do, the way that you talk, the way that you pour into individuals. Quite honestly, for those of you that don't know, I was in a conference recently in Miami, and Stefan was the speaker, and he had the opportunity to pray over us in the room and to, I say preach because it felt very like you were up there. You were in your zone. You were saying things that we all needed to hear. And I so appreciate the energy that you bring into a room, the person that you are, the way that you talk to people, the way that you see people, and the way that you're making us all better. So I appreciate you being America's Life Coach. I appreciate you being in my life. And I just look forward to having more conversations with you.
Thank you. I receive all of that and I appreciate you. I
Yay.
loved this conversation.
Thank you. So I'm going to link ways that you can find him on social media, his website. Stefan does have his holiday playlist just went out, and it is absolute fire. Y'all know how I feel about music, but the playlist is absolute fire for holiday music. So if you need a holiday banging list for Spotify or Apple Music, I'm going to link that on there too. Please follow him and all of his wonderful teachings. I'm so happy you were here, and thank you.